Welcome to today's webinar on Quasi-Experimental Design. I'm Steve Sassman, a PhD student at Prescott College, and will be providing a brief overview of Quasi-Experimental Design. This is going to be a super swift overview, and I'm definitely still learning in my journey as a researcher, and I hope you will join me. What is quasi-experimental design, you ask? Well, sometimes we cannot always conduct research on random groups, as there may be predetermined groups we are wishing to study, and often these groupings cannot be manipulated by the researcher. For example, one's socioeconomic status, gender identity, religious affiliation, and so on. The researcher, or researchers, use an explicit independent variable or intervention. The first quasi-experimental design is attributed to Dr. Joseph M. Rice, who wanted to study how effective various methods of teaching spelling were in public schools. He referred to these as the mechanical method, which consisted of long dedicated lessons, and the progressive method, which consisted of much shorter lessons sprinkled throughout the day. It wasn't until 1963, however, that Donald Campbell and Julian Stanley coined the phrase, and while they weren't busy styling their mustaches, they were quick at research design. One famous study which utilized quasi-experimental design was conducted by Cicerelli and Associates, who wanted to measure the effectiveness of the Head Start program. As the participants were selected based on government eligibility into the program, it was difficult to have a control group, and the results of the study actually showed that those in the program performed worse academically than peers not enrolled in the programs. The researchers used a covariance statistical method, and this revealed that the poor performance was likely the result of the children who were selected for the program being more disadvantaged academically than those who were not eligible, which leads us right into threats to validity, as pointed out by Shadish and Lulin. The 9 threats identified by Shadish and Lulin consist of ambiguous temporal precedence, selection, history, maturation, regression, attrition, testing, instrumentation, and additive and interactive effects of threats to internal validity. Let's dig deeper into these threats by using a potential experiential research project as an example. One of my favorite experiences was back in my elective high school environmental science class when we paddled down the Susquehanna River to test water quality. Though I may still be able to tell you why finding level 3 macroinvertebrates is an indicator of a healthy stream 10 years later, let's think about some potential flaws with a study using this applied experiential approach. First, let's look at ambiguous temporal precedence. With many variables, it can be challenging to decide what the actual cause of the effect is, whether that be the desired outcome or not. Was it being outside? Was it working collectively? Was it being able to apply classroom knowledge to field research? And did the skill development of canoeing hinder the desired outcome, which was learning about the science behind water quality testing? Now let's take a look at selection as a threat to validity. Did the students choose the elective course solely for the purpose of it having an outdoor trip component and weren't actually interested in environmental science? Did students choose this course thinking that it would be easier than a traditional classroom science class? Are the students in this class not on our college prep track, nor are they eligible for advanced placement courses, meaning that the students are less high achieving than more apt students who are on these pathways? Now let's take a look at history. What other factors are influencing the experience? How does the instructor's teaching style influence learning prior to the applied sessions? Does the partner organization who took the students canoeing complement the teacher's style, or does it conflict with their pedagogy? And on to maturation. How do we verify the test results were caused by the specific experience and not the natural development of students? Is it the following classroom sessions that actually generate the desired outcome? And regression. Did the students get more focused on canoe skills rather than the science that we were looking to study? What sort of review was implemented following the experience? Attrition. Did students drop the class after the canoe trip, which left only those students who are more interested in environmental science and therefore more likely to be successful in the class? On to testing. Did a traditional written exam follow the experience, and did this conflict with the learning preferences of those who were able to learn from the applied field experience of the canoe-based water quality testing? Or would those who perform well in traditional testing scenarios have scored well regardless of having the experiential activity to supplement the course, and vice versa? And instrumentation. Are the positive or negative associations with the experience the result of environmental factors such as weather? Was it hot? Was it cold? Was it raining? Were students horsing around, and did that take away from the experience? And are the students more focused on the actual activity of canoeing more so than the applied science in initial questioning? And finally, we're on to additive and interactive effects of threats to internal validity. So in a nutshell, this pretty much just refers to the combination of all the various factors that can influence our research. For example, did bad weather cause already struggling participants to struggle even more? Or did really nice weather make students just want to sit around and lounge and bathe in the sun? So, how do we avoid these threats to validity? By beginning our research design with questioning of our 9 threats, we can validate that our intervention is the true cause of the change in our dependent variable. And now let's take a look at 6 applications of quasi-experimental design. The one group post-test only design, the one group pre-test post-test, the non-equivalent comparison group design with no pretest, the non-equivalent control group design with pretest and post-test, interrupted time series quasi-experiments, and the regression discontinuity design. First, we have the one group post-test only design. In this design, we have a treatment, and then we do one post-test with one group. This is the quickest and probably easiest to do. However, this also runs the risk of the most threats to validity as there is no control group in which to compare the results. And now we have a one group pre-test, post-test. So with this one, we conduct a pre-test and then the treatment and then a post-test afterward. So this allows the research to establish a baseline to measure the treatment effect. However, it doesn't take into account factors like maturation that the subject would grow regardless of the intervention. And next is the non-equivalent comparison group design with no pre-test. So sometimes we may have a study that someone asked us to do where the group is already formed and we don't have the opportunity to conduct a pre-test to establish a baseline. With this one, however, we do have a comparison group, so we can look at causation behind the effects of our study. And now we have the non-equivalent comparison group design with a pre-test and post-test. So this one, we have our control group again. And we also have an opportunity to conduct a pre-test and a post-test with both groups. And next we have an interrupted time series quasi-experiment. So this one consists of multiple tests. I'm going to throw a treatment in there. Boop, 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 boop. And it keeps going because the recommended process is at least 100 observations to measure the effectiveness of the treatment or intervention. And finally, we have a regression discontinuity design. So this one, we have a cutoff score to make an initial assessment to assign participants. And then we run a test to measure the outcome of the treatment. In summary, this experimentation strategy can be utilized by researchers, particularly in the educational field, as we often have predetermined groups to work with. This method does require the researcher to think critically while developing this study, as we must be prepared for multiple variables that ultimately appear within groups. By addressing these potential threats, we can ensure validity and use research to continue to improve our educational system. When using this approach, it is important to integrate thorough statistical analysis so that validity can be fully assessed. And thank you for joining me. And because we love ethical research, here are the references used for this webinar.